a feature of clinical anxiety is anger.
Yeah.
And a lot of angry men are actually anxious little boys, and they just haven't learned to show fear. And we know that unhealthy masculinity that harms women, but it also harms men.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to really challenge that and push back against it, because there's still boys coming up that have that belief that you shouldn't show emotions, only anger.
You're listening to Be Well by Kelly LeVeque. Dr. Billy Garvey is a developmental pediatrician with over 20 years experience working with children. He is a senior specialist at one of the largest tertiary pediatric hospitals in the world, where he sees families, trains clinicians, and other professionals working with children, and conducts research in child development and mental health. He is also the founder of Guiding Growing Minds, a social enterprise that aims to give all children the opportunity to reach their potential and live rich and meaningful lives. The Pop Culture Parenting Podcast is a part of this vision. He has also written a book called 10 Things I Wish I Knew About Your Child's Mental Health, which is Australia's #1 parenting title and was shortlisted for the ABIA General Nonfiction Book of the Year. Billy Garvey.
Hi, Kelly.
Man, oh man, I was looking forward to this interview. We have mutual friends in common, and then I went down a rabbit hole of other interviews you've done and your childhood and building your practice and then connecting with people through pop culture and movies. And I just think you're, one, so creative, and you have such a big heart for our youth. And I was just, as a mom of 3 boys, you kind of get into the nitty-gritty on masculinity. And I was like, that's it. Dr. Billy Garvey, when you come to California, come be on the show. And here you are. Thank you for being here.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. I've been really excited for it too, Kelly. And I don't know, it's creative. I appreciate that compliment. I'm not sure how creative I feel. I'm just kind of really passionate about it, I think. And then, we had this idea like 4 years ago now that we could convince people to be interested in the science of child development and mental health by using it in the context of like the movies we grew up watching. Because it's like, as you know, like it's one of the cultural influences on us is like, what was masculinity? It was the tough guy that like just punched the bad guys in the nose and just buried his feelings. And, mum's role was to make dinner every night and just pat their kids on the head to bed, couldn't possibly have a career, couldn't possibly be doing things like that. And so, we have to challenge those stereotypes and those beliefs that we came up with because they influence us. And, ideas about masculinity, ideas about how we build resilience in kids, about how we actually support each other. And so it's a really beautiful thing to be a part of. So thank you.
Yeah, well, it is creative. It's a creative way to connect with the audience, especially because movies can be so moving. Like I think about my husband, Chris, like I've seen him cry twice, maybe 3 times we've been together since 2007.
Yeah.
And that's with me having a conversation, like not on our wedding day, like pretty traumatic, like loss of friends and family members type of a moment. But on international flights, if I look to my left or my right, wherever he's sitting, and he has the headphones on and he's deeply immersed in a movie, you can see a wave of emotion come over him. And sometimes I'll see like tears dripping out of his eyes. And he, to this day, isn't letting me recognize that he's having these emotional responses to movies, but they are truly a way, I feel like, for that little teapot to open and the steam to release and for like the scream to be released or the emotion or the feeling that maybe is like really trapped down deep inside. I'm always like, I want you to have more emotions and like let them out. And I'm always talking to him about that. And we joke, and like we've joked on this podcast. He's like, Kelly, I don't feel sadness. Like I just don't feel sadness. I don't have time for that kind of a thing, like joking. But part of me is like, but I want you to feel sadness.
Yeah.
Because I want you to model that, but I also want you to release that. Like one of my favorite things ever is like a good cry.
Same.
If I get to this place where I'm actually just like, okay, I'm going to lose it. And I like lose it and cry. Like it's just, God, the most cathartic release. And then you feel so much more resilient and being able to like manage whatever is coming your way. But I can see how movies can be a way to like really connect with people because it does pull out emotion, but it also allows people to like imagine themselves in a scenario that isn't thinking about their own traumas or their own experiences. So we were talking before the show started and you mentioned Pretty Woman and Home Alone and Batman. Can you give the audience a taste of some of the examples that you use in helping them understand like, what's really at play here for these characters?
Yeah, it's beautiful. And I have to say as well, like, isn't it amazing that you're supporting your partner to have, more emotional expression? Because I think as little boys, we're taught that it's not cool to cry. And, it means that a lot of our experience, and maybe it is genuinely, no, I never feel like that, but it's not really a safe feeling to have, and especially to express publicly. And my daughter is 4 now. I've got 3 kids and my daughter's 4. But when she was 3, we were driving in the car and she said, and she'd been stuck on this for a long time, I want to be a boy. Mm-hmm. And her mum, who's amazing and a beautiful representation of a woman for her to look up to, said, how come you want to be a boy? And Yvette, my daughter, said, because boys don't cry. And so at 3, she already knew that. And my partner jokingly was like, your dad cries all the time, because I do. And, kind of shot me a sly look. And I was like, I take it in jest, but you have to be careful that she doesn't think that it is a joke for a man to be crying. And so it's this really interesting thing. And even on my own podcast, for the first year, I would often cry reading the stories people would tell us, because I experienced them in clinic, but it's kind of different when strangers write into us and tell us the trauma they've experienced and the hardship and the worry they have about their own kids. And I used to apologize for it. And a listener actually wrote in really sternly and was like, you have to stop apologizing because you're actually telling the audience it's not okay. You need to be safe doing that and show us that we're all safe doing it as well. And so, it's been this really interesting journey, even within my own podcast, about it's actually okay to do that. And one example I'll give you, I guess, so it's quite funny. I sometimes feel old because sometimes I'll talk about movies from I was born in 83, but I think there's so many classics. Were you? Amazing.
Right on.
Yeah, that's so cool.
42.
Perfect. All the cool kids were born that year. We've spoken about a couple of them, but there's a beautiful... So we train nationally people in mental health first aid, how to respond to someone when they're really emotionally distressed. And we use Thelma and Louise because it's this amazing movie about 2 really protective relationships that go through, I don't know how much you can remember it, but it's this awful story about these 2 women that have lived really hard lives on the run. And at one point they realised the money that was going to get them out of this trouble has been stolen by Brad Pitt, actually, by young Brad Pitt, one of his first roles. And they're just distraught and they don't know how to help each other. And so one of them's on the ground crying and the other one's like, just get up, suck it up, we got to go. And, we know that that's not helpful. We know it's not co-regulation based. It's not science based. And so then we talked about how do you actually support someone from a crying little baby to a teenager who's self-harming in a way that is evidence-based, that's therapeutic, and everyone should know how to do that. They should be trained properly in how to do it. They should have good connection with supports when they're beyond their capacity. And the movies give us an idea about, I weave the theory through the entire movie and then I pick the scene and talk about, like Home Alone is a classic because you probably know this, but there's actually evidence for timeout that got built by a guy called Montrose Wolfe. And we use timeout to demonstrate what not to do in Home Alone, because she just sends him to the attic and then get out of here, punishes, I'm going away from you, I'm withdrawing love, like the worst thing we do to kids when they're not doing what we want them to. And I'm being a bit mean on that mum because she's, then she leaves him and goes to Paris. Feels terrible about it. But the way that timeout was actually built was I leave with you.
Time in.
This is like decades old, but Montrose Wolfe and his team described someone is struggling in an environment and you leave with them. You go with them and say, this is overwhelming. And you co-regulate, come back with them. And then you make a plan of what we can do positively, strengths-based, to succeed in that environment. And I'm going to give you whatever level of support you need to do that. And then I'll withdraw my support and continue to watch that you succeed. And if we need to go out again, we go out again. But it's not because you're failing. it's because you just need more support and skill development and help. And like, I do that with my daughter.
Yeah.
You know, I do that with all the kids I meet in clinic when they're really struggling. I do it with my daughter. I worked in childcare, disadvantaged community I grew up in, lots of traumatized kids. And I would do that with them. I'd go out of that space and sit down on a curb with them and just sit there and hold that space. If I'm going to say anything, it's, I'm so sorry this is happening. What can I do to help? Doesn't matter what they've done. They're in threat mode, they're stressed, they're anxious. And, you know, it doesn't mean there's no consequences and things, but it's about how do I actually connect, co-regulate, and then guide that person back. And so, yeah, we use movies as a way for just to people to access that kind of, that evidence.
It's gone so, well, I don't think timeout maybe it still is a practice that people are using a lot, but it was something that I grew up with, like soap in the mouth, timeout, you know, like maybe more. I mean, my parents are so loving, but I think it was a lot more popular in the 80s to be a little more authoritarian and have these like my way or the highway and like this listen and respect, but with like sternness that wasn't, I'm going to come sit with you and work through this.
Yeah. And it's even your beautiful use of the word authoritarian, and that kind of is parenting evidence that's decades proven across cultures around that a lot of us grew up with that, like, because I said so.
Yeah.
I'm the law, you know, the judge dread. And I remember one of my best friends, actually, beautiful dad, and he grew up getting the belt.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'd be sent to my room, and he's like, the worst bit was how long my dad would make me wait. And then I'd be sitting there in my room and I'd hear him taking the belt off his clothing rack in the wardrobe, and then he'd come in, classic, this is going to hurt me more than it's going to hurt you, all of that kind of stuff. And he's like, I knew not to do that with my kids, but I didn't know what to do instead.
Yeah.
And so that's the challenge, isn't it? That like a lot of us hear about how harmful this stuff is, whether it's things like little babies should just cry it out, or time out, or punishments, all of that stuff, but no one's giving guidance on what's a practical thing to do instead. Yeah. And kind of whenever a kid is struggling, we always try and get caregivers or educators, whoever, to think, what do you want them doing?
Yeah.
Is that realistic? If it is, help them do it. If it's not realistic, like that they're going to sit there for an hour and dinner and talk about how great their day was and how grateful they are to be in this family and like how nutritious this meal is. Yeah. You know, it's like, let's set an achievable goal that kind of makes this a positive experience. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of it comes from for me, is that I sit in a clinic at one of the biggest tertiary pediatric hospitals in the world. I train 6 fellows a year in this stuff. It's getting harder and harder to get access. Same thing that's happening here in the States. We're seeing increasing rates of mental illness in our kids. And yeah, you know, from everyone thinks it's just the teenagers, but it's actually, your statistics are the same over here. Preschool to emerging adulthood, your rates are 20% fall into mental illness, including the preschoolers and the primary school age kids. And a lot of them just can't access support. And so I've got a 3-year wait to see me in clinic, and I say the same thing over and over again. So I just thought, how about I go out into the community and actually go to where people live their lives and talk about what I've learned through, like, you know, it sounds like a really big thing to brag about, but I've done 14 and a half years of full-time university in this space. Like, I've just finished my PhD. Like, I've been working with families for over 25 years. This is something that I really care about. And probably the same as you, I love being a clinician, but you kind of, which is the beautiful thing you're doing as well, how do we give this access to the broader public so that they're not sitting on a 3-year wait list or actually never seeing anyone and just feeling like it's all their fault because they're a bad parent, or this is a bad kid, you know, and he's doomed and I just need to tolerate this, you know, when there's so much you can do to change the story of these kids. And that's the beautiful bit about it that comes back to me way more than I give it out.
Yeah. My new amino acid supplements come in flavorless and lemon water, and they're flying off the shelves, and here's why. I have meticulously sourced these vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. I am so proud of this being made the Be Well way, with maximum quality and minimum ingredients. My flavorless is simply those vegan fermented essential amino acids from Japan. Our lemon water contains minimal ingredients of only organic lemon powder, organic citric acid, and organic monk fruit. No natural flavors, no artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no emulsifiers, no additives. This is simply that nutrition targeted for your goals. If you want to give my Be Well protein or aminos a try, or restock it if you're already loving it, take advantage of my gift for podcast listeners. Code PODCAST10 is going to get you $10 off just for being a listener. Write it down and shop with me after you listen. Winning your mornings starts with a strong night routine. For me, sleep is everything. If I don't get it, my whole day feels off. And that's why I'm so excited about AG1's brand new nighttime drink, AGZ. AGZ is designed to support restful, restorative sleep with clinical studied ingredients, including adaptogens, herbs, and minerals. It's melatonin-free and works with your body's natural sleep cycle to help you fall asleep, stay asleep, and wake up feeling refreshed. It's the perfect nightcap, especially during the back-to-school season. I love to drink it about 30 minutes before bed, warm with water, and my favorite book. The difference in my sleep has been incredible. I fall asleep faster, sleep more deeply, and wake up energized, not groggy. AGZ helps me optimize my sleep so I can show up fully for my mornings and my day. If you want to take your sleep seriously, I have a special offer for you. Head to ag1.com/bewell and get your free welcome kit with the flavor of your choice, including a 30-day supply of AGZ and a free frother, because sleep tonight really does define tomorrow. Well, you're living proof of that. I'd love for you to talk about your childhood and what you experienced and why that's made you so passionate about giving back to that type of youth. And I mean, it's obviously non-discriminatory. It's like 20% of our youth in affluent areas and in disadvantaged areas. But mostly I just like hurt for those little kids that like don't feel like they have a secure attachment and a support and like someone there for them. And then the people who are there for them, you nailed it on the head. Like, yeah, we don't want to put soap in our kid's mouth and slap them with a belt. But like, how are we not like bribing, incentivizing, like grounding, punishing, like we're killing internal motivation and we're not connecting with our kids. So like
totally two really important things that you said. Like we build motivation intrinsically, in kids by figuring out what do they care about? How do they feel about themselves? Like secure self-esteem comes from that.
Yeah.
I'm motivated to be driven towards the things that I care about, and I feel intrinsically good when there's a stretch, but I succeed, as opposed to you're a good boy. Like, or, when we talk about process praise is really important, as opposed to not it's so great that you won the game for the team by getting the final goal, but actually I saw how hard you were trying out there. You should really feel proud of yourself. And that's a different way that we kind of work away from like more superficial extrinsic rewards and praise to how are you feeling? I saw how much you were trying, like that effort. And it's not, people push back against that as this like participation trophies and, there's no actual accolade for the people that are really good. And it's not binary. It's not one of those or the other. Yeah. It's about how do you just tap in through the other beautiful thing you said and connect with the experience that our kids are having. And what we train our fellows, parents, my PhD was in building educators' capacity to support kids who are struggling, is being curious about what the experience of the kid is. And it's interesting, there's really good data that shows, and it's actually US-based, 93% of parents say that they support their teens really well.
Yeah.
20% of teens say they feel supported.
Whew.
So you think about that gap.
That sucks.
Yeah. And I don't know, like going to because I think it's helpful. I always feel like I'm kind of playing a tiny violin when I talk about my story about like walking uphill both ways to school through deep snow and like, but I grew up in a really disadvantaged community with a single mum, two brothers. Neither of my parents finished high school. My mum like had some awful stuff happen in Ireland and fled and landed in Australia as a teenager that was pregnant. My older brother's dad left, never met him. And she was, a teenager at the other side of the world, bringing up my older brother and then me and my little brother. And she worked 3 jobs. She was a waitress. Like we had a lot of financial insecurity. Often there wasn't food in the house, and it's interesting what that did to me because and then there was a lot of domestic violence. My mum was really mentally unwell. She really struggled. Really severe acute mental illness. And then I got kicked out of high school, and I was told all through my high school I was a bad kid. I was never going to amount to anything. I even did a talk recently where I grew up, and I was like, I'm one block from where my high school girlfriend's mum told me that I was worthless and told her daughter to break up with me and never talk to me again because I was never going to amount to anything. And I was doing this talk there, kind of reflecting all these years later about how much that harmed me, that experience, and my sense of who I was. And so it built this drive in me. When I got kicked out of school, I couldn't get into any of the schools in my area because the school that got rid of me told them all how bad I was. And so even though legally I was meant to have a spot, they were like, had excuses for why they didn't have a spot for me. And I kind of then went through, like I scraped through and was told even all through my 20s that I'd never amount to anything. Like I worked in factories, but it was interesting because where I came to find something I cared about was working in childcare. And it's interesting, it's the same place that I got sent to, and I hated it as a kid. I was the first kid dropped off, last kid picked up, me and my little brother, hated the place. My mum was working so many jobs that was the only way she could make it work. And then it's so ironic that I ended up working there. And I even remember one of the toughest kids who I look back so fondly now was this like scrawny little redheaded boy who was just wild and drove everyone crazy and was like smashing windows.
Like, is that me?
Yeah. It was like, this is a little bit too close to come. So then I went on and became a developmental pediatrician. And I think that I spend a lot of my time, if I'm being brutally honest, looking for myself in clinic. There's this healing process that's happening about little Billy who just hasn't healed, and trying to heal my inner child through the thousands of kids that I met in clinic. And, I sit in clinics where I see kids that no one else wants to see because of how bad their behavior is. Everyone's given up on them. They've gone through 13 foster homes. They've been kicked out of every school. They're in and out of juvenile detention. And sometimes I read the referral letter and I get a bit scared. I'm like, oh man, this kid sounds full on.
Yeah.
But then they walk into my room and I'm like, you're a kid. That's right, you're a kid.
Yeah.
And there are no bad kids. Like I wasn't a bad kid. I'm not a bad kid. There are no bad kids. And like some people will challenge me on that and be like, what about all these kids like committing crimes and breaking into houses and stealing cars? But they were all little kids that sent up hundreds of flares, and we as a community let them down because we told them you can't come to kinder full time.
Yeah.
You're not getting along socially, you're acting out, you're hitting other kids, you're not concentrating in class, so get out of the classroom. You're bullying or you're being bullied. Like we're so lost at how to support kids through their developmental progression with so many things that are modifiable. And the biggest risk of what we're actually talking about is adverse childhood experiences. And in the States, the data shows that over 70% experience one of them. That's abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. Interestingly, in the States, 17% of Americans experienced 4 or more of those things. That's the biggest predictor of adult mental illness. I experienced 4 or more of them. Like my depression, all of the mental illness that I've gone through in my adult life was because of what happened in my childhood. And, it wasn't my mum's fault either. She was just, I meet a lot of kids that have been taken away from their parents by child protection. I'm not a better parent than those parents. They're just holding more weight than I am with less support and less resources. And those things are all modifiable. Like if we can get in there and think about things like what you were talking about, how do we reestablish healthy attachment?
Yeah.
Attachment's not set in stone. Like often gets spoken about as like in the first 3 years of life, you've got to have a responsive caregiver and they've got to meet your needs. And if they don't, you're going to be insecure for the rest of your life. That's not true. Like all of us that you've gone through a bad breakup, you become insecure about future relationships. You worry you don't deserve love and that you're not going to find it again. And then you have healthy relationships that emerge and you rebuild that sense of safety and security in people. And I see kids change their trajectory every single day in clinic that have come to me that people are like, this kid's a lost cause, just diagnose him and medicate him and see what you can do. And that's the least important stuff that I do.
Yeah. It's such a good analogy, like a a bad relationship, a breakup, the insecurity and the secure attachment that comes after that, because there is so much pressure. And we were talking before the show started, like, I love what I do. I'm so passionate about it. Like, I love this podcast. I love my community. I love being able to like share what I learn with other parents so they can like be better. Like, I also love being my boy's mom. Like, and I love being fully present. And sometimes I burn the candle at both ends and I'm bad at both, but my favorite thing that I've learned from like other parenting experts is that repair, that like, no, like you can always be better. You can always rebuild. You can always say sorry. You can always reconnect. And like, knowing that is so powerful especially for parents who listen to podcasts like yours and they're like, man, absolute failure. Flunk me, give me enough. Like, what am I using as my parenting techniques? How am I like just, being present and not kind of going with those reflexes of I'm gonna parent the way I was parented and that's good enough. Or, I think in your worst moments, you just pull out of the hat, however you were parented, or like those easy things where you're like, I'm going to take away dessert. And you're like, what am I? He's 4.5, like
totally.
He doesn't want to share his truck. Like,
I know. And you know all of the research around healthy meal times and healthy relationships with food and no pressure and making it fun. But we all still fall into the like, you're not leaving the table.
Yeah.
And then we grow up and we wonder why we never like Brussels sprouts and stuff.
Yeah, I know. It's really hard being a parent in today's day and age, but experts like you who are training other fellows, who are sharing your stuff online on your podcast, who are making it understandable, accessible, and using like easy analogies like that give parents hope. Like,
yeah, I think there's also a storytelling thing about you and I, like, and sharing what it's actually like. Because I remember I'd worked in the space for like over 15 years. We run an unsettled babies clinic at the tertiary hospital. And when my daughter came home for the first time, Annalise, my beautiful partner, was just exhausted. And I was like, you go to bed, I've got this. And after 2 hours of her crying straight, Annalise walks out of the bedroom, takes her and just settles her. And I was like, I didn't have it, know. And I think there's this idea that, you see so much on social media where you're like, the moment my child was born, I knew what my meaning in life was, and I've never experienced so much love. And if you're sitting there, like, postnatal depression is in 20 to 30% of new parents.
Mm-hmm.
Even like milder examples, my daughter, who's now 10 weeks, when she came home for the first week, I was sitting there and I get hardly any time with her because I was back at work 2 weeks later, and I'm sitting there with her on me and she's looking at me and I'm finding myself drawn to my phone. Yeah. And I'm just feeling so much shame in that moment. Mm-hmm. But what I was able to do is I was able to move away from that shame and think, why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. And it's because of how stressed I am. I'm dissociating, and I need to take the pressure off and drop the demands I have on myself so that I have the capacity to be present with this beautiful little baby while she's there. And your point is a really good one about repair, but also your point about it's not about spending 10 hours a day with our kids. It's what we do with that time. And that idea of, safe, loved, and celebrated are the three really important levels that we should be with our kids. And they decide whether they're safe. They decide whether they're loved, which is a really uncomfortable thing because we're like, no, they're loved. But they have to feel that. And we prove love of our kids in the tough times, not when they're doing what we say. Like, oh, you brushed your teeth? Now I love you.
Yeah.
You prove that you love them when they throw the toothbrush in your face and say, do you know what I mean? And it's totally. Not about, it's okay. That's permissiveness.
Yeah.
But it's about, well, no, we're going to sort this out. This is going to happen. There's a hard boundary because it will help you feel safe.
Yeah.
But also I go towards you. I support you. I don't withdraw my love and support. And the joy thing is really cool because I think that joy thing is like a beautiful thing for all of us to aim for. How is there minutes of joy with our kids where we just celebrate them? Because a lot of us didn't experience that growing up.
I am so excited to share with you guys an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness. Meet Fatty 15, powered by C15, the world's first essential fatty acid discovered in over 90 years. Scientists are calling it the longevity nutrient, and for good reason. Fatty 15 was founded by Dr. Stephanie Van Watson who uncovered C15 while studying aging dolphins. Her research revealed something incredible. C15 works by strengthening our cells, improving our mitochondrial function, and protecting us against damaging free radicals. The result? Better long-term metabolic, liver, and heart health. Fatty 15 is powered by pure vegan-friendly form of C15 and an odd-chain saturated fatty acid that's more stable than most polyunsaturated fats. That means it resists oxidation, staying potent in the bottle and in your body. It turns out that many of us are deficient in C15, which results in weaker cells that make less energy and quit working earlier than they should. All of that makes us age faster, sleep poorly, and feel sluggish. But by replenishing our cells with that essential C15 nutrient, the only ingredient in Fatty 15 effectively repairs our cells and restores our long-term health. Plus, it comes with a gorgeous reusable glass jar and refill capsules shipped quarterly right to your door. Fatty 15 is on a mission to replenish your C15 levels and restore your long-term health. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/Kelly15 and using the code Kelly15 at checkout. Can you walk me through safe, loved, and celebrated? Like an example, you can use your toothbrush example, but how do boundaries make kids feel safe, and how can we love through boundaries, and then how can we still be fun and celebrate them?
Yeah, great question. So I think from a safety perspective, the most important thing is that kids need to feel safe, and kids feel safe based on the relationships that are around them. Mm-hmm. You know, like I feel safe in this environment because for 15 minutes before we started recording, I had a beautiful, warm conversation with the three of you.
Yeah.
If I just rolled in here and you're like, sit down there.
Let's go, Billy.
Yeah, you were 2 minutes behind time. Like, we've got to do this. You know, just sit closer to the microphone. You know, I wouldn't feel safe. Yeah. And that's the environment of schools for a lot of kids. Educators are the most important professional in the world, but they're not given enough support and training. They're not paid enough. And a lot of the kids that feel the kid that throws the chair through the window, mm-hmm. he feels the least safe. Mm-hmm. And our ability as adults to say that I actually have the capacity to stay here with you and hold this space is what makes them feel safe. Mm-hmm. You know, it's an interesting thing to think about, is like, we talked about mental health first aid, but we feel safe because our relationships aren't conditional, mm-hmm. because there are boundaries. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. your kids feel safe when they're out in public with you, mm-hmm. because they know that you're not going to let anything happen to them. Mm-hmm. But there's an emotional difference in physical safety, but there's emotional safety which is actually born out of, you can have any emotional experience you want, mm-hmm. and I'll be able to hold. You know what I mean? Like, imagine you're amazing with your three boys like that maybe, because you don't want them to grow up and be like, I don't want to cry. Yeah. Because I never felt safe to cry.
Yeah. I actually have had experiences with my almost 7-year-old Sebastian where he'll start to cry and he'll say, I don't want to cry. I don't want to cry. Stop making me cry. And I'm like, I'm not trying to make you cry, but I want you to be able to cry. And I talk him through what it feels like, what we were saying. I love to cry. I don't want to cry all the time. I don't want to feel dysregulated. I don't have control over, I don't know. It just feels good. Like I said, lift the lid. And it was really worrying to me that he was having this response in the car on the way home from school, that he needed to cry. And I was just sitting there waiting for him to have that emotion. And then he started to cry and immediately was verbally telling me he didn't want to cry. Don't make me cry. And it was heartbreaking. I went home and told my husband, I was like, our car, our home, it's okay if socially at school, he doesn't want to feel like he can. Yeah. And the construct of that is allowing him not to. But there's got to be a place for it. And we need to be really careful when their reaction is big, big emotions. And we say, don't cry, shake it off. Why are you crying? All of those little social cues are basically our mess ups that he is not feeling like he can cry. And I'm I'm good with the tears. I don't think he's going to be any less tough. I don't think he's going to, I think he's going to be more emotionally regulated because the more that we say no, and the more that we say please, this, your emotion doesn't match the situation, or like whatever you're hearing online, and you're like saying something like that, like it just persists.
Yeah.
It gets worse.
Totally. And you think about, where does he see safe role modeling of emotional expression, especially with men? It's often only anger.
Yeah.
And like, this clinical anxiety, a feature of clinical anxiety is anger.
Yeah.
And a lot of angry men are actually anxious little boys, and they just haven't learned to show fear.
Yeah.
And so it's a beautiful thing you're doing, because you're creating a safe space, but role modeling, narratives, storytelling, safe conversations about your own experiences and self-disclosure, and, his dad having those conversations as well. Because, there is a really big risk that he decides that that's actually not strong, it's weak. And we know that unhealthy masculinity, that harms women, but it also harms men.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to really challenge that and push back against it, because there's still boys coming up that have that belief that you shouldn't show emotions, only anger.
I don't think it's gonna take a massive wave and lots of people like you or trained people under you to really share that message. Like we were talking before the show, like I there's a suicide rate that's kind of like it's staggering and really scary, and especially with like young men. And I feel like I really worry. I mean, it's touched me personally, in my community, in our school community, and it's just, like not the person I ever thought would do that. And it's
heartbreaking, isn't it? Because it just devastates. I had the same thing, and you just think about how, like, you wish you'd known, that person was struggling so much. But yeah, and it's interesting, because the evidence shows us that, like, a lot of people worry about asking people about whether they've thought about suicide, but firstly, the evidence is strong that doesn't put it in their head, and then they go on and do it. And most teenagers will say, with self-harm and suicide, they've been thinking about it for months and months before they ever spoke. And that the loneliness in that and the vulnerability in that is terrifying. And it just devastates communities, because they get stuck in this dysfunctional thinking of everything is my fault, it's going to impact every part of my life, and it will always be this way. And there's so many therapeutic approaches that can heal that dysfunctional thinking, but access to it is really hard. And it's why, like, even asking, checking in if someone's okay, but you've actually got to be okay and have the capacity and the space and the time for them to say, no, I'm not. It's a bit like schools that put up zero tolerance of bullying. If then there's bullying there, it's worse. You should take the posters down. Because or it's like telling a kid you're fine. Like we have a rule that we don't say you're okay. We say I'm here. So when my kids are struggling, like when my kids are struggling or a kid is struggling in clinic, I don't tell them how they're feeling or minimize. I validate their experience. And saying I'm here is beautiful, because it signals to the kid I'm here, but it also tells me, reminds me what our role is. It's I'm here to support you. And the thing that you made me think of as well, of the emotional expression, the bit I fall into a trap is in public, when one of my kids is blowing up in public. Because you kind of look around and you don't think straight about your kid. You go, who's watching? And you have this
for an audience.
Well, you're tempted to like just push it down and be like, wait till we get to the car. Like, we'll sort it out at home. I'll give you whatever you want if you'll stop crying. I'll give you a lollipop, all of this stuff, because you just don't want them to cry. But actually, it goes back to your question. That's what safety looks like, is that Dad was actually cool with me having a massive meltdown in public. And it was actually okay. And he showed me how safe the relationship is, because he just held space with me. Like that's, and don't get me wrong, I'm not doing that all the time. Like I don't want to sound
goals.
Like,
absolute
but that's
goals.
what I'm aiming for, and we're talking clinic as well about plan A, plan B. And plan A is skill building. It's let's get better at getting in the car and it not being a battle. But plan B is like, we're going to be late. You're getting in the car. And we've got to give ourselves permission to be like, if you do this thing, I will give you the lollipop. And that's a plan B thing. But if you make it fun and you make it skill development and you make it a partnership thing, that's a plan B thing. And whether that's like soothing and settling in a baby, or that's like talking about risk in teenagers and everything in between,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, do I have the capacity for a plan B approach to this?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I actually just need to get through this and I'll do whatever? And giving yourself permission that you're not harming your child
Mm-hmm.
by going, actually, I just need to get through this day.
Yeah.
Because I have heaps of days like that where I'm like, I just need to get to the end of this day.
Yeah.
You know?
It can be very overwhelming and you're not your best parenting self on those days either.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And that idea of like kindness and compassion intrinsically to ourselves is really important too, because the hardest thing that I have in clinic, especially with mums, is convincing them to prioritize their own mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And they will always say to me, I'll be fine when my kid's fine.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
You know, your kid is not going to come out of clinical depression unless we can strengthen your capacity to support them. You can be selfish and look after yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, get your own, go and see a therapist, go and do something for you. Have some space from all this stress, you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of parents are so self-sacrificing that they're like, no, I can't do any of that. But we're also role modeling our kids. Like the beautiful thing you're doing is you're showing your 3 boys how ambitious you are, how much you care about the community.
Yeah.
You know, because you don't want them to come up and being like, oh, mum just sacrificed everything for us.
Right.
She never did anything
for herself,
for the community.
For the community, for the greater good. Yeah. I do. It's interesting because saying that example of like a little boy who has clinical depression and a mom saying like, I'll be good when my son's good. That is also like, I feel like doubling down on his clinical depression, because not only is he like failing himself, he feels like he's failing his parent because her happiness is now somehow in his hands and his control. And that is like such a weight to have to be like, not the parent to your parent, but like be the container for their emotional well-being.
Yeah.
That's a lot to carry as a kid. I think about that quote or that statistic you shared that like teenagers only feel supported like 20% of the time, or like 20% of them feel like they're actually getting supported, but all the parents feel like they're supporting. Like where's the mismatch coming in, and like what are techniques for us to be able to like support our children from preschool through
beautiful question.
Teenage life.
And I meet those kids in clinic every single day, those teenagers that feel that double weight of like, I can't go to school.
Yeah.
Like our school attendance rates internationally are plummeting.
Yeah.
You know, kids are not going to school. If they are going to school, it's an awful experience for them, especially neurodivergent kids.
Yeah.
They just hum with anxiety and they mask, and it's like, you have to be here. I had a mum recently who, you know, daughter was self-harming, neurodivergent, didn't want to be at school. And the mum was like, honey, it's like my work, you just have to go. And I really have a beautiful, trusting relationship with this mum, and I challenged her on it. I was like, no, that's not true. She doesn't have to go to school. She doesn't have to go to an environment that actively traumatizes her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it was really important. I'm like, what an awful thing we do to kids and to ourselves. We tell each other all these things you have to do, but kids should go to school because they want to be there.
Yeah.
Because that school community, true inclusion is a school is stronger because every single kid contributes to it in a positive way, in a way that is individual to them, that harnesses their strengths. Inclusion is not a kindness. It's we are a stronger community because we have the capacity to tap into every single individual that's here, especially the neurodivergent kids. And your question about like, and it's not a worry sometimes when I say this, that like we earn it, like we earn trusting relationships and kids learning how to navigate risk in toddlerhood, it's not like this, before you go to your first party and you're 15, I'm going to have one conversation with you at the end of bed and talk about drugs and talk about all this stuff.
Don't do any of that stuff.
But we learned, like we help them navigate that on the playground as toddlers, about risk, about evaluation, about social skills, relationships, conflict resolution, emotional regulation, you know, all that stuff. And then we journey with them. But a beautiful strategy that I talk about this in the book actually is building sanctuaries with our kids and saying, this is something that I do just with you, hopefully once a week. And it's not, you're going to help me make dinner or you're going to help me get groceries. It's just to celebrate you. It's just for us to connect, to be 100%. And it doesn't matter what happens. You got kicked out of school today, it's still happening. We'll need to deal with what's happened. And I'm really upset about it. And we're going to have to do something. There's going to have to be a consequence and all those things. But this thing still happens because underneath everything, the relationship trumps everything, you know. And the families that I see that ride some of the awful adversity really well, and get through it with the least harm to them in the long term are the ones that are really relationship based and have things like sanctuaries built into their practice. And they will drop stuff like how clean the house is. They go, we didn't have capacity to do that until we realized actually maybe the beds don't need to be properly made every day. Maybe the laundry can sit on the floor in the laundry for a couple of days. Who cares? Because it's not going to be how clean our clothes are that determines my kid's future mental health. It'll be the relationship I had with them. And one adult that protects you, all of the evidence shows us that is one of like a handful of collective protective factors that every kid should have in their life. Other ones are feeling a sense of belonging at school, participating in community traditions. You think about that. If you're a cultural minority and you look around and the cultural traditions you don't associate or you don't participate in them, you're really vulnerable to feeling like an outsider. You're more vulnerable then to experiencing bullying, anxiety, depression. Other things are, a really beautiful one is 2 non-parental adults that take a genuine interest in you. That's a really cool thing to think about for your 3 boys, my 3 kids. And I don't have any family to offer my kids. So Nick, who I do pop culture parenting, he's the closest thing to family that my kids have. And he's actively protecting their mental health by how much he celebrates them when he sees them, the routines that he builds in to play with them. It's this beautiful thing that's an evidence-based thing. That's not a like touchy-feely kind of thing.
It's like tribe. It's your tribe.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking about like, where do we have identity there? And then other things are one adult that I could speak to my feelings. So you're doing that beautifully with your son. And then thinking as well about quality friendships. And so those are actually, I spend more time in clinic looking for those handful of things than I do writing a script for stimulants, an antipsychotic, an antidepressant, or giving a diagnosis. I do diagnose kids with autism and anxiety and depression and ADHD, but I actually spend way more time thinking about where are those protective experiences for this kid, every single kid I meet in clinic, to be honest.
Yeah.
And we should think about that with our kids. Like, do we actually prioritize that stuff over things like academic results?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of a rogue one a little bit. Like my dad was always telling me, just try your best. And I'm like, it was never like get straight A's or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I remember, he would question me like, do you feel like you tried your best? And like, I knew personally if I mailed it in or if I actually showed up and worked my hardest and like studied for the exam or like showed up for the soccer field or did whatever it was that I did. And it always felt worse when he asked the question if I knew I didn't show up for myself. And there was definitely a couple times in classes where I had like subjects that were difficult to me. I was more math and science. And some of the other ones were just, whether it was like my grammar, and to this day, people following on Instagram are like, you still don't have that down, and that's fine. I figured out a way around it and I'm an entrepreneur. And if you would like to correct my English in your comments, feel free. But at one point my dad looked at me and he was like, you're not going to be good at everything, and C's for degrees where it doesn't work out for you. And I'm like, his love was never conditional on
your performance,
my performance. And he always struggled in school. So I feel like his experience, he was always telling us about his experience, like barely getting by, getting held back in first grade, like having all his friends go a year ahead and him remembering feeling like a failure, and then me looking at his life and like proof of his like entrepreneurial journey when the world basically told him like, you're not professional enough, you don't have enough degrees, you don't have enough letters behind, that he just like proved them all wrong as an entrepreneur, and
amazing.
like, and loved life and have fun showing me that like you can, like school is only so many years. Like you have the rest of your life to like really like be your own person. And I'm really grateful. He like definitely protected me in that regard, and was really more concerned about like who my friends were. He was always asking like, tell me about your friends. And he never, like talking about the risk or like drugs or whatever, may impact some child's life. He would just ask like, tell me about the kids that are doing this kind of a thing or that kind of a thing. And I'd say like, oh, Dad, like I'm not going to tell you that, And he's like, no, just tell me. I'm not going to tell their parents. I don't care. I'm going to write their names down though. And when you're a senior, we're going to see where they're going to college.
Mm.
And I was always like, oh my gosh. And he pulled that list out my senior year and was like, let me know, And it's like they're not bad kids, but these things are going to make them struggle and they're going to keep you from maybe having an opportunity to go get a PhD or.
Well, they're probably lacking people like your dad in their life.
Yeah.
That is, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we think in clinic, I ask 2 questions of every kid, like, what do you like and what are you good at?
Yeah.
And you were good at maths and science, which is interesting because what you've worked in clinically is very maths and science based, as a nutritionist. And then you also have this beautiful entrepreneurial component that you obviously have had this amazing role model in your dad that's like, this is how, this is where I want to drive my energy towards. And so you have this beautiful like scaffolding around your strengths and role modeling. And I think a lot of kids don't have that. They're just told, they hide things from their parents because they don't feel safe actually telling them and disclosing. It sounds like your dad's asking beautiful open questions. Like even mental health first aid shows us that you're more likely to disclose something you don't feel comfortable about if someone's not looking directly at you.
Yeah.
And so that's why going for a walk, sitting on a curb, being in a car.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? In a car, you feel less challenged.
Less interrogated.
Yeah. And so thinking about how do I set up opportunities where I'm just journeying next to my kids and asking them open questions. And we also know things like open body language, as we said, open questions, low, calm tone, thinking about eye contact and just even not standing over kids. Like it's a really simple one that a lot of people fall into a trap of like
looking down.
Eye level at or below theirs. How are we thinking about the environment? Do they feel safe here? Is it likely that one of their peers is going to walk in at any time so they won't feel safe opening up and talking about it? Do I actually have protected time or is my phone about to buzz? Or I've only got 3 minutes and you need to sit here and tell me about what's happening with your friendships? And then validating that experience is really important because their entire body is telling them that they're anxious. And if you say no, you're telling them their body's wrong.
Yeah.
And so many kids get told that their body's wrong, instead of actually learning how to tap into that emotional experience, have their sensory and emotional needs met, and then be able to process it in a healthy way. Like that's what we should guide all our kids towards.
So we look for all of these like protective relationships and community, tradition, like do they feel included in school? And you're checking in on all the things over like, let's say grades and academic or athletic performance. Or
the beautiful thing is all that stuff improves grades and athletic performance as well.
Yeah. So I think taking like a 360 view of like our child's mental health from those 5 points and then looking at ways to support them, those feel like skills. Like I don't feel like innately good at them. Like, I mean, maybe I have some internal instincts and I had like really great support. Like I can talk about my parents all day,
Yeah.
But I mean, we're all just humans too. And we screw up all the time. So
totally. And you might have had a different experience than me, but no one taught me how to regulate emotions. I was in my 30s when I learned how to do that.
Yeah.
Because I have a sensitive temperament as well. So that means I'm more likely to have big emotional responses to my environmental experience.
Yeah.
And that's 20 to 30% of kids. My oldest is like that. And so the beautiful thing about that data is those kids with sensitive temperaments, which is set in stone before you're born. You change your attachment, you can never change your temperament. She will always be like that. I'm a sensitive, I will always be like that. More vulnerable to adverse childhood experiences, more vulnerable to rejection, bullying, feeling like a failure, all of that stuff. But in all the things we've spoken about, safe, loving, celebrating relationships and environments, they thrive because they're so sensitive to relationships. They're often, it's like this ridiculous notion that kids with autism don't have empathy. Often they have so much empathy that it overwhelms them. And we just don't understand. Flooded. Well, because our version of empathy is you come over and give me a hug and you say, "You okay?" But actually their version of empathy is just being really distressed by the experience that you're having, and it overwhelms them. And we take that as them being cold, but actually they're just trying to go through this process of being so worried about the other kid. And, empathy is a really interesting thing because it's such a strong pro-social skill, but we don't actually understand how to build it, what the developmental steps are, and you have to understand that, or with emotional regulation, or with conflict resolution, or with all this stuff that you're talking about, which you're right, they are skills, and they are skills that you can build. Like I don't know about you, I never got taught about emotions growing up.
No, and I think my parents really prioritized being happy and grateful.
Yeah.
And for good reason. Like, I don't think I had, when I look back, I wasn't prepared for the traumas that came in college, birth trauma with my first son. Like, I was just floating in outer space when those things happened at certain points, like being in sort of a narcissistic, abusive relationship in college that was a lot of like cheating and infidelity. And I think like, holy cow, like I was so underprepared for those because I was in a bubble, like just like protected in a certain way, but also, I don't know, like they were always checking in, like, are you happy? Like, do you love it? Are you happy? Like, and I tend to do that because I think that that's my upbringing. Like, you're good. Everything's.
I know, but there's a risk in it that we have to be careful with of like, you've had this birth trauma, or, you're in high school and you've just been rejected by the social group you thought you were friends, that they come home and we say, well, you should be grateful because, there's kids in Africa that are starving. And
it's like finding the silver lining.
Yeah. It's like, that's a really unhealthy way. Like, gratitude is like, it helps some of us when we're in low levels of frustration, but it doesn't help. It's actually harmful for those of us that are really distraught. It's not a path. It just puts shame on you for feeling like you can't go on and being like, how dare you feel like that the world has ended because your marriage is falling apart. There's people that have it way worse. And then you're like, God, so I can't even feel safe to like feel like.
So sadness and shame.
Yeah. But it's a really interesting thing. I think the positive psychology movement is really helpful in so many ways, but it's actually not helpful in clinical mental illness. Like, it's like a rung that's so far. It's when you've healed and then helping you, it helps with relapse prevention, and it helps with motivation, and it helps with sense of self and all that stuff. It's not as helpful with clinical depression or not wanting to live anymore or feeling so anxious that you can't be in a school environment. Validating that experience and learning a skill set to manage it, that's the important bit about what does success look like where you don't become dysregulated. And that might just be seeing one of your friends from school, writing a letter to your teacher, thinking about what was the stuff, talking about what you liked about school. Not, sweet, here's the point, you've had the whole term off. By this date, you need to be back, and I'm dropping you off. We know that fails. Even the kids that stay in those environments, they just hum with anxiety and they go, I can't be safe here.
Right. I'm curious because obviously you're an expert in this and you've been coaching other clinicians and working in clinic with kids and parents. And you just said you learned emotional regulation in your 30s. Like, how much like self-healing and trauma healing and understanding like your childhood is important for showing up for your kids?
God, yeah, so important. It's interesting. Two interesting stories with that are I had a beautiful dinner a couple of weeks ago with Dan Siegel, and we were sitting and I'd never heard of it before, but it's like a Jeffersonian conversation. Have you heard of this? Where you like ask one question and over hours everyone answers it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful because he's like, you know what he's like. He's this amazing like expert in interpersonal neurobiology, and he's like, instead of us just casually talking for the next couple of hours and we won't get to all talk to each other, let's do this. And the question was like, what got you into the field that you're working? Because we all work in the same field of like child development, mental health, trauma stuff. All these like 7 phenomenal people like him. And we all told our stories. And interesting, everyone, I think Dan would feel comfortable saying this, came from adversity and trauma in childhood. You know, there's this interesting part about that. A question got asked at the end of it when you told your story of, do you look back and feel proud of yourself? And everyone but me said yes.
Wait.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this other guy who was there, who's a phenomenal expert, but I don't have permission to say his name, but he was like, of course you don't, because that's not what you're looking for. You're yearning for healing. And it's like, it's probably out of my reach. And I was with my therapist recently, and two funny things with my therapist, funny and emotional and a bit sad. But I was talking about my social enterprise and all this stuff. And I was like, I just feel so arrogant sometimes, because I said to my therapist, I was like, I think I can change the world. I think I can change the world for all these kids. And he's like, of course you do, Billy. You had to. You had to believe that. That's how you survived. And it's this interesting thing that I was like, but then I was like, but I don't feel vulnerable. I feel invincible. Like, I walk around the world feeling invincible. And he's like, yeah, you have to do that too. And it's an interesting thing about, how do I change that experience for my kids? How, like, I don't know if my therapist thinks I will. I don't know if I'll ever take that armor off. I don't know if I'll ever feel safe enough to be little Billy who's vulnerable. I think I'll walk around pretending I'm tough. Like, I got in so many fights. My first time I walked on 20-something years ago to a pediatric ward in a hospital, I had 2 black eyes. First time I ever saw a kid as a patient. I had 2 black eyes. I'd been jumped by 5 guys and got beaten up really badly. And yeah, that happens to me like so many times. And my idea of masculinity was, I never started a fight, but I'd never walk away from one, because it would be worse to walk away from a fight and not feel like a man than to stay there and get beaten up. And I have to be really careful that all my 3 kids, especially my son, I give them the strength to actually be vulnerable, so that they're not going through the same experience that I did. You know, it's such an important thing that we do for our kids.
Can you talk to me about that? Like, do I call it toxic masculinity, and like what you experienced and what you expected of yourself in this armor, and like, how are you going to, even if you can't take it off, like how are you instilling the ability for your son to like walk away from a fight and feel like more of a man?
Yeah, well, where it comes from for me is, I watched men physically abuse my mum. I watched them like threaten me to get her to do stuff, you know, like, and I will never forget for the rest of my life standing up to one of those guys. I was like 14, and he obviously wouldn't cross that line, and he never assaulted me, but it felt powerful. Like, do you know what I mean? It was like, I finally felt like a man. I felt like I was defending my mum. And that's such an unhealthy, like, that's trauma, but it's also this, and I saw stuff way younger than that I just like, and I can protect my kids from those experiences, but I've got to be really careful about the beliefs. Like, you probably know the strong research around the man box, and it's ideas such as real men don't show emotions, gay men aren't real men. You know, I'm more powerful the more sexual partners I have. I should never turn down sex. Picking on cultural minorities. I should always know where my partner is. I should have the final say. If I need to, I should use force. The interesting thing about all those beliefs is they increase the risk of intimate partner violence in future relationships, but they also increase the risk of male mental illness. But where are the voices challenging that? Think about all the toxic masculine voices that are in the world right now. And there's so many boys that are being left behind by systems that are out there on their own, and all they want is connection. They don't care if they're breaking the law. They don't care if they got kicked out of school. They want friends. And if those friends are also running around dysfunctionally, treating women like objects, breaking into houses, they'll do that because they just want to feel like they're connected to people. But where are the voices challenging these really unhealthy? It's often women. Like, where are the male voices saying this is not what a man is? You know, even in media, I've like, even in media, sometimes I'll be on a podcast or TV or something and I'll cry telling a story, and men will come in and mock me for it in the comments. And it's 2025.
Yeah.
Like, I can handle that, but the young men that are coming up watching that, we should, like, not me, but we should think about what we celebrate in men.
Mm-hmm.
We really celebrate athleticism.
Mm-hmm.
And think about the things we give a pass for because of their athletic prowess.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they cheated on their wife,
Mm-hmm.
but they won the game, they won the league. And so we give them this pass, but we should actually say, no, that's actually not good enough. We don't care if you're not a nice person, if you're not pro-social, if you don't protect everyone in your community, if you don't make sure everyone feels safe and valued, then we're not going to celebrate you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's this weird thing that we do where we just, and even historically, we look back at some of the traditions, the Spartans and all this stuff, but actually that's not what they were like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of those cultures, men were very affectionate to other men,
mm-hmm.
but we can't do that. As straight men, we feel uncomfortable doing that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm actually really affectionate to my male friends.
Mm-hmm.
I tell them I love them,
mm-hmm.
and I want my son to watch that and be like, that's actually okay. And intimacy is an interesting thing. Like, you and I are going to have to worry about our kids being exposed to pornography.
Yeah.
We didn't worry about that when we were coming up through primary school and high school. The access that's there now wasn't there.
Yeah.
But what we want is that they know what healthy intimacy is. And so it's so foreign to them when they see it,
mm-hmm.
that they feel uncomfortable if they see that and go, that's actually not what sex or intimacy is,
mm-hmm.
because I've been taught about consent.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that in my parents. I've seen how they hug each other and kiss each other, and how it's this beautiful, intimate thing that they have, because so much of that's behind closed doors. And then if you never see it, no one ever has a conversation with you about it, and then you see this awful pornography, you're like, oh, maybe that's what it is.
Yeah.
And then these awful things happen to our kids because no one showed them any better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a thing I really worry about, because all the statistics show that those beliefs are still really prevalent in our men. And it's not a coincidence that, as you've talked about, suicide rates are so high.
Mm-hmm.
From 15 to 45 years of age, one of the leading causes of death. And it's because I'm not a real man if I show my feelings.
Well, I'm sure your friends are so grateful for your affection and your love, and the same with your wife, your partner. Because when I think about, like, I was joking about Chris saying, like, I don't feel sadness. But he has a best friend that he has had, that Uncle Shane, shout out Uncle Shane, I'm sure his wife Heather's listening.
Yeah, amazing.
Who is an emotional guy. When they coach the boys' teams together, and when they give the trophies to the kids, Shane's the guy that, like, gets teary-eyed.
Beautiful.
Heather walked down the aisle, he was a blubbery mess. Like, he's always, joke. Chris is like screening his calls because he calls him like he wants to podcast with him. We'll call him all hours of the day, and he'll be down to talk while he's like doing his work. He works for a tech company, and he has lots of like work calls. But Shane will just call, and I'm like, pick it up. And he's like, he's been calling me all day,
Yeah.
But he's just like he's a friend who's in his face and emotional about how he feels about him and cares about him. And like, that support is invaluable to Chris. And whether he tells Shane directly or not, like, our family all feels that, because he has that type of love and support from another man.
Yeah.
That is, it's unconditional.
But not just Chris, your boys.
Yeah.
Uncle Shane will protect their future mental health.
Well, and that is that person for my boys. Outside of our family. He is all accepting, all loving, all play, all fun, and very emotional. And it is a wonderful, beautiful, like, ecosystem of our friend group to have that as an example for them. And then, it is also funny that you mentioned that, like, that real intimacy in your relationship, because I'm always like, you got to be real affectionate with the boys. Like, and like bedtime, I'm like, give him a big hug, give him a big kiss. Like, like I'm like reminding, because Chris is like, oh, bedtime. Okay, he's like systems. He's like go guy, like.
Which are good around bedtime.
Yeah, like, I mean, he's definitely a well-oiled machine, and there's only a plan A. We don't have plan B, he gets it done. But I'm always like looking for that softness, that I'm in a house of all boys, But I was sitting at the table and he said, move your hair. And I like pulled my hair back because he was like putting everybody's plates on the table, and he started rubbing my back, and Sebastian turned bright red. And he was like, it's like you guys just got married. And like was like visibly embarrassed. And it was cute because I like looked at Chris like that was, I love that, like in that show of like affection that isn't like super sexual or that is just like supportive. And I always like want to give that positive reinforcement for that, because I'm like, they are watching.
Yeah, well, you're going to be the blueprint of their future relationships.
They literally hear everything you say, but they're watching everything you do even more, And after like we put the kids to bed that night, I'm like, I like just let him know. I'm like, that was so like, I loved it. First of all, thank you for the back rub. But like to see them see that type of affection when that's not, he's an affectionate guy behind closed doors, but like when that's not your like set point in public, because like we talked about parenting to an audience, like he doesn't want to be the center of attention. He doesn't want to be like, look at that couple holding hands, or like that guy's like kissing that girl in public or putting his arm over. Like he's just like, don't look at me, So it's sweet to show that intimacy, and I could see how that could really like be the blueprint for kids when it comes to these things like they might have access to porn, like learning about like violence online, like drugs, like all the things. Like how and when do we have these conversations that are not just like go have fun, climb to the tallest part of the playground? There is a risk that you fall from there.
Yeah.
Like, how are you looking look where your feet are or whatever?
But it's a beautiful analogy, because there's a difference between a risk and a hazard. So a risk is like, I know I'm getting higher and I might fall and hurt myself as I go higher. A hazard is I didn't realize the branch was rotten and I step on it and it falls.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to understand, was the kid actually aware that risk was increasing?
Yeah.
Or did they just go to the party not realizing there was going to be drugs there?
Yeah.
And so that's actually not risk taking. That's just not being aware of a hazard.
Okay.
And so it's a different approach. Also, you did a beautiful thing where instead of saying be careful, be careful. God, it's just like, it still gets me of growing up.
I definitely say that sometimes though.
There's no actual guidance in it. You know what I mean? Instead of watch where you put your feet. Like, what bit are you going to grab next? And that's the same thing about going to the party. What will you do if you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Do you feel comfortable saying that you don't want to do something if your mates are trying to pressure you into it?
Yeah.
Like, and it's not telling them. If someone offers you drugs, you better say no. You better call me the moment it happens and I'll come pick you up immediately.
Yeah.
Like, no teenager's going to do that.
Yeah.
So you want to be like, and be honest about our own experiences through self-disclosure.
Yeah.
I really struggled with this. I got in a really bad spot because I got caught up binge drinking because I was just trying to be cool.
Yeah.
And it actually put me in really awful situations. And I wish that someone had sat down with me and taught me healthy ways to navigate that space. And then also, like, Devora Heitner, I don't know if you know Devora, she's one of Tina Payne Bryson's friends. She talks about even social media being, you guide your kid through it with increasing autonomy. Instead of like, you turn a certain age and now you get a phone. Good luck.
Yeah.
It's like, we'll actually do it together. We'll share a phone at the start. I'll help you navigate it because I'll be able to see all your messages. I'll be able to see all that stuff. I don't want to isolate you from your friends. We'll get to the point where you have a bit more autonomy. Let's see how it goes. If it stuffs up because you do something and wasn't what we agreed to or stuff, we'll just come back a bit and we'll wait until we're ready to progress towards that. You know, it's an interesting thing. And I think we spend a lot of time like, you know, we worry about our girls, but we don't worry about our boys. We're just like, they'll figure it out. It's a bit of a rite of passage. Yeah, it's a bit of a rite of passage. And it's interesting because on the podcast, we used Fight Club because Tyler Durden is just like idolized. He's this like broken, I mean, he's fictional. He's an imaginary personality, but people idolize him because they're like, oh, look at his six pack. And like, you know, he's so tough and he just takes the world on. But actually, he's this really unhealthy version of masculinity. And I called those series of episodes Beautiful Boys because when my daughter was born, I called her beautiful. I showed her affection, all this stuff. When my son was born, I struggled with it. I called him mate, like it's an Australian slang.
Yeah.
But I was almost doing it in a derogatory way that I'd be like, come on, mate. Like,
yeah.
And then I had to make an effort to call him beautiful. And now I call him beautiful and gorgeous. And he was like acting out, breaking stuff and hitting all those things. And I was getting really annoyed with him. Even when my 10-week-old was born, for the first few weeks, he was like poking her in the eyes and like trying to step on her head and all this stuff. And instead of coming down on him, what we actually did is we got dolls and I reinforced him looking after those dolls. And now he's beautiful with her. Like because he's been given the skill.
Yeah.
And we reinforced the pro-social behavior that we wanted. And you think about what's happened for girls, we've got really good at like opening up sports and being like, you can be any profession you want.
Yeah.
But we don't feel uncomfortable if a little boy is playing with dolls.
I know.
Or a dollhouse.
Yeah.
Or like wants to, is interested in flowers. But it's ridiculous, isn't it? Because it's like we've maintained this narrow world for boys to live in, and then they really struggle when they go up into the world because they're not actually who they feel they are internally. And you had that question about like, how do we know if our teens are the ones that do feel loved and supported, or are they in the majority? And you ask them, you just ask them, hey, do you feel loved? Like, I love you so much. I didn't know I could love someone. Do you feel that? Instead of telling them you're loved. Yeah. Especially, I put a roof over your house. That's not love. That's caregiving.
Yeah.
Like Bell Hooks actually talks about that. Phenomenal author in this space and amazing women's rights advocate. But that is caregiving. That's not
my
love.
Job.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not love. Love isn't, I pay the bills in this house.
Yeah.
I put food in front of you.
Yeah.
And do you feel loved? Like, in thinking about the relationships that matter to us, we probably never ask that. Do you feel loved? It's like it's a really beautiful thing to think about from quite a young age. And I tell my kids all the time how much I love them, but I also ask them, and they get annoyed with me about it.
Yeah.
Like, we know you love us.
Stop it, Dad. But it's just a really good reminder, because that's 70-something% of parents who are like, yeah, my kids feel supported. I support my kids so well. Yeah. And you're like, I drop them off at school. I put a roof over the head. I make them meals. I sign them up for their sports. I take them to church, whatever the thing is. But it's like the real meat and potatoes of the relationship is like,
every single
are
parent
you
loves their kids.
connected?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Are you connected? That's a beautiful, and it's quite funny because they talk about a lot of dads spend so much time, like they really care about the handicap in golf, and they like consume so much media about golf. They're like spending thousands of dollars on new equipment. They go to the driving range and practice a single swing.
Yeah.
They care way more about their kids than their handicap, but they don't approach being a parent like that. But I wish they would. I wish, like, it's, we teach a kid to ride a bike by giving them a little support, celebrating them, helping them up. But with emotional regulation, we're like, figure it out.
Yeah.
You're having a meltdown, I'm going to punish you. But if you punish the kid for falling off the bike, you'd look like a bad parent, wouldn't you? If you're like, you fell over,
get to
your room.
Yeah.
But we do that with kids who haven't learned emotional regulation yet. And I remember a listener wrote in quite offended about golf because he's like, I took real offense at you criticizing me for going, but it was funny because he was like, because I listened to the podcast at the driving range. So I was like, all right, I don't want to sound like I'm attacking people who are into golf.
Yeah.
But the skill development thing, which you started talking about, is such a evidence-based, interesting way to think about how do we support our kids in their social and emotional development, which is the biggest predictor of their lifelong success in terms of mental health, physical health, income, trajectory through school, relationships, community engagement, is their social and emotional development, not how smart they are. It's like, how good are they at conflict resolution, sharing, compassion, communication.
It's like, if you were to give, I mean, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours.
Same,
but
like
if you were to give parents, and there's so many tools, and you want them to feel like this safety and love and celebrated, you want them to be able to feel like they can self-regulate, but you're there, you're time in, you're not time out. Like, if you were to give parents one piece of advice, like for helping to build that emotional regulation in kids, what would you say to do?
Beautiful. So it's a great one to pick because you could have picked 50 things, and that's a great one to pick. So when we think about our approach to building emotional regulation in our kids, I'm going to talk about one of the three aspects. The other one is how we support them when they're emotionally struggling. The other is how we role model our own emotional difficulties. And the third one is how we talk about emotions when no one's struggling.
Okay.
Those are the three pillars of building emotional skills in kids. If we focus just on when they're emotionally struggling and we use co-regulation, then the first step is always, how am I going? It's a really important first step. I met a dad in clinic a while ago now. They called me and they were like, my admin team were like, Billy, you've had a cancellation in the clinic. I was like, thank God, I'm going to get to go home earlier and see my kids. So like 14 kids a day. I was like, I'll get out of here early. But we've filled it. There's a family that's coming from 3 hours away. They've only been waiting 18 months, but they're really desperate. And I was so annoyed. This kid comes in. He's got 3 younger siblings. He's 7. He's been told he's not allowed to go back to school until he sees me. And they essentially want me to medicate him. This huge man comes in, refuses to sit down and take a seat. He's the dad of the baby, but not the dad of the other kids. There's a newborn baby in there. Mum's had a really hard life. He's just standing there over the whole family, just grunted when I said hi. Don't even think he told me what his name was. I go through the way we've talked today about all this stuff, connect with the kid. What are you good at? What do you enjoy? Hear all the bad stuff about him, change the narrative in the room. You know, that must be really hard for you. I bet you wish that school was more fun. Blah, blah, blah. Right at the end of it, as he tells that the appointment's ending, the dad says to me, I got a question for you, Doc. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, great.
Exactly.
He's talking. He's going to ask something. And he says, how come when I hit him, he flinches every time I walk into the room for the next few days? He didn't understand it. He genuinely didn't understand because that's how he was brought up. Now, there's like a reporting component and a safety to that. But what it gave me was an opportunity to make that home safer for all those people. Because what I taught him was co-regulation. And the first step is, if you are stressed, you go nowhere near him. And that's all of us. Like if a kid is struggling and we can't regulate ourselves first, we cannot co-regulate them. We will dysregulate them. Now, functional MRI studies have shown us the relationships where we know each other. If we did more stuff like this, we would get really good at co-regulating with each other because we feel safe and we're connecting. We're telling relatable stories. We're sharing intimate parts about parenting and all this stuff. And so our brains are learning how to sync and how to respond and pick up subtle facial cues. And so then if you're calm and you can learn how to do that and you go towards your kid, not to co-regulate, but to connect. And connection happens before co-regulation. And it is, some people talk about match the energy, not the emotion. Some people talk about like, you know, this is what I think is going on. I'm here. I'm so sorry it's happening. Whatever that connection point is, and every kid is different. All my kids have a different way that I connect with them and they have a different way I co-regulate. My daughter, she has to come to me. I can't go to her. If I go to her, I'm chasing her. And I've done that before. And it triggered me actually because she was playing up with some mates over. She's being really rude and not sharing. And she got really upset and ran into a room and I followed her. And I followed her into a room and I started giving her a lecture. And then I just flashed back to my childhood of being followed when I was really stressed and I just wanted my space. And I just apologized and left.
Did she erupt more?
Yeah. She's just like, I'm trying to get away.
Yeah.
Like, and you're chasing me.
She's flooded.
Yeah, exactly. She's flooded. So I stuffed it up that time. I gave her heaps of space. But other times I stay a couple of meters away from her and I drop down and I don't even say anything to her. And she will get there in 30 to 60 seconds. She'll come to me. And then she has this big emotional expression. She often hugs me and we do deep breaths together. That's our co-regulation tool. My son is different, but we just do these deep breaths. And it must be quite funny because often it's out in public and people must watch. She's like a mini version of me, like exactly the same hair. And we're just doing like these deep breaths together. and then I go, that was great, well done. And I go, let's go back into the environment and let's be a really good friend. Or let's actually let your brother have a turn first. Or let's see how well we can have dinner, you know, and I reckon we can do it. And that's how I go in, that quiet enthusiasm. That's really important. Like we use that therapeutically, use it with my kids. And that is how you build emotional regulation because then she will learn to self-regulate independently. but you learn that through co-regulation. And that's how I do that. It's how I teach that dad how to do it. And that is a safer home now because I've been able to do that with that dad. And I've taught him, and, you know, there's been a lot of child protection involvement and all that stuff. But those kids are safer now because that guy knows how to co-regulate.
I can't even imagine. That is like so scary, that kind of physical abuse.
Yeah, like, and I you know, you probably feel the same. It is such a privilege, the work that I do. I can't believe I get paid to do it. And I tell families, I'm like, they always say thank you. And I'm like, no, I get paid to do this. It is my job to make your life easier, to make this kid feel more success, to feel safer. It's a huge privilege to meet these kids and then watch them. And the worst kids, and then years later, they shake my hand or they come back as adults. Like, I probably shouldn't say this in media, but like, I tell these kids that even though you've aged out and technically not allowed to come back, just call up the clinic.
Yeah.
And they'll come in, you know, occasionally and say to me like just how special it was. And I didn't do the work. The parents do, the educators do, the social workers do. Like, I'm just the person who's explaining a concept in a way that they can actually walk out of the room and do it.
But it's those tangible tools that allow your daughter to take deep breaths. And then when she gets bigger and is an adult, can co-regulate with her kids and like also make better decisions. I think there's so many times where we just like have emotional responses or make knee-jerk decisions, and then it's not like thoughtful. And it's like you're giving them that space to be thoughtful. And then they're not their, you know, traumatized child. They're like their mature adult.
Yeah, and they need to choose it. It's another really important thing. Like, I don't force my kids to say please and thank you. I want them to understand why we do that because of how it feels for the other person, and then to choose to do it. And we know that around moral development, if you build it, not force them to be compliant, but you give them the space. And it's, you know, you and Chris will probably be like, this is who I hope our kids become, but you can't force them to become that. You're like, this is what matters to me, other people and kindness and compassion and giving back to the community and living healthy lifestyles, because they've watched you do it, not because you've sat down and told them that's who they should be. And I think a lot of us grew up with like being told who you'll be, and you have to say please and you have to say thank you. And it's just performative then. It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
And it's that kind of intrinsic value, I think, is the thing. And it's also like the other thing, which I'm sure you're like this clinically as well, but I tell all of the kids that I meet, I'll see you as long as you want me to. And there's a kind of safety in that as well. It's like, this guy's heard all the awful stuff about me and he's cool if I come back.
Yeah.
And as long as it takes, he's happy to see me.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'm so lucky that I get to work in a public system that's like
supportive of that.
Yeah, but also just outwardly says, I love doing this. You don't have to say thank you. This is a huge privilege. And I often, when I get to know them, I'll talk about this is healing for me, you know, because I'm getting to see this kid's story change and how beautiful that is for me.
Just breaking the cycle for so many families.
Yeah. I think I'm doing it in a little way, but I'm actually giving the skills to the people that go and do the work. Is like, what do we actually do? Like we went back to, what do we do instead of the belt?
Yeah.
You know, and I think a lot of families and professionals feel stuck where they're like, if I can't send him to the principal's office, what am I meant to do? If we don't suspend him. But like, it's really interesting because it's the only time I've ever shared a research paper on Instagram was where I talked about how schools that expel kids are actually worse for the kids that are left behind, because that's the argument. It's like, well, what about all the kids? They shouldn't have to be in this environment. And a kid who's kicking off that severely is a symptom of a school that needs more support, not a symptom of a bad kid. And someone was like, well, I'll just drop all these kids off at your house in the morning then instead. I was like, here's the research paper.
Yeah.
You know,
I would
that proves that.
I would imagine that it shows that the kids who are in school feel unsafe or feel like they can't make a mistake or feel like horrible for the child that's expelled. I mean,
but also unsafe as the educator. You feel unsafe because you're like, this kid is throwing chairs across the room.
Yeah.
Like, and so that teacher needs to feel safe that they have the skills into how to respond to that, how to spot it early when it kicks off.
Yeah.
Like most people in this space don't feel confident they could recognize signs of emerging mental illness. Just terrifying.
Right.
Because everyone should know what they are, like anger. like difficulty paying attention, like always needing reassurance, difficulty with sleep initiation and maintenance, decreased change in diet. You know, like these are all the things, somatic symptoms, tummy pain, headaches, feeling fatigued. Those are all the symptoms. And it's interesting. Yeah, anger is a really interesting one that most people don't realize it's actually anxiety. They think kids are choosing to be angry, but it's actually just how they feel safe expressing how anxious they are.
This is what I mean. I could talk to you for hours.
Sorry,
so we're
yes.
going to answer how we can support those parents whose children are angry, which are actually feeling anxiety. What's the first? Let's leave that as like the golden nugget and the close of today's podcast, because I feel like that is such an unmet need. And how can we support those kids who are actually feeling anxious?
Yeah, so I think if you have a child who's really angry, thinking about actually maybe they're not choosing this, maybe they're anxious, and then thinking about, like, we know, so CBT is not the only tool, it's often not the best tool, but it's the one we have the most evidence for, and it's got the strongest evidence for kids who are anxious, and it has 5 steps. The first is psychoeducation. You and I have done that this podcast. We've talked about what does anxiety look like? What does it feel like in our body? Talking about emotions, all that stuff for everyone around. Then we talk about symptom control, and that's co-regulation. We help kids go through anxiety by that. But you have to do psychoeducation first, because everyone has to understand it, because otherwise people go, no, the kid's angry. You shouldn't be doing deep breathing with him. You know, it's like, no, he's anxious. That's why we're helping him. And then cognitive restructuring. And that's, you're so worried that you're going to stuff up. And so you're just kicking off and getting out of here because you think you're going to fail. But because I've co-regulated you, what else might happen? What about that time last week when we were really nervous about walking through the school gates? And then you came home and told me how excited your friends were to see you. You showed me the art you did. You can't start there. The kid who's terrified to go through the gates, you can't be like, remember the artwork from last week? Because they're just dysregulated. So you have to go through that step. And then we think about exposure. How do we go gently back into that environment with an achievable goal? And then we talk about relapse prevention. And most of the time what happens in the community is the kid that's anxious, we go straight to exposure. Sometimes we'll do a bit of like, well, no, that's wrong, but that's not healthy cognitive restructuring. That's just telling kids they're wrong. And you can't tap into their executive function, higher functioning brain anyway. And we never do relapse prevention. And that's why relapse rates are so high. We just go, thank God we've got through that. But you think about all the pillars we spoke about. You think about how do we keep putting energy into the relationship, sanctuary, safety, love, celebration. All of those things are relapse prevention. How do we make sure we keep doing the work around the stuff that matters to us? And that's kind of, just a simple breakdown of like one component of what we do around the kids that are really struggling.
It's beautiful. It feels like a real undertaking as a parent to carry the weight of like our children's like emotional capacity and or regulation. But I mean, just hearing it over and over again and remembering that this is like not a sprint. It's not you get it right. It's not you figure it out. It's every time they age up and something else comes up and you have to learn on the job at the same time, that we're just always focused on the goal, which is connecting and supporting, and being a container for all of these feelings as they come up.
Yeah, and I remember Nick, who I do the podcast with, like he was talking about, God, this stuff's hard, but he's like, it's hard anyway. So he's like, if it's going to be hard, I may as well do something that's actually going to help and actually makes it easier. So I've been doing the podcast for 4 years now, and he'll often talk about how, like, because he does it for his kids. He doesn't do it for the podcast. He's like, I roll in here every fortnight, and he's like, it has instrumentally changed my kids, my own sense of self, my own childhood, and the quality of my life. And it's not because, you know, we're amazing. It's because there's this phenomenal community around it, and we're just trying to bring the evidence into the real world, trying to say, you know, and that's what you're doing as well. I think there's so many clinicians out there that just sit in a room, and that's the only way you can get to them, and you will never meet most people. So coming out into spaces where people exist and sharing your knowledge and expertise, and most of what I've learned is off the thousands of kids and families I've met, not years and years of clinical practice or university. It's honing it with those kids.
Well, I think that is a sweet spot, actually. Like, I just want to be a megaphone for your clinical experience, because you have people who haven't seen clients or haven't had years working with people and understanding like, oh, these are emotions and this is co-regulation, or in my world, like this is a coping mechanism and this is a habit and this is like, they haven't been able to stretch themselves and prove that they have the ability to stick to something or like feel proud of themselves, or like you find, you have these like human tools because you've worked with clients all day long. And that's when I feel at the top of my game, is actually when I can be working with clients and then kind of understand the themes or start to, like connect the dots like we're in geometry or something. Like I want the proof, and then to be able to distill it down. And that's why I was so grateful that you've been able to be here all the way from Australia and have this conversation across the table, because that's what's so amazing about your work. It's not just hypothetical, theoretical, a pie in the sky. It's like, this is my lived experience. These are all the kids I've seen in my clinical practice. This is what I'm seeing that's working. And by the way, I'm going to donate all this time to putting out a podcast that is easy for, the lay person to feel connected to it and learn some tools to support their kids. So you're doing amazing work and giving so much of your time to your community and now to ours.
Well, thanks, Kelly. I think you are too. So.
Go listen to Dr. Billy Garvey's podcast and read his book and connect with you online. Where can people do all that? Where can they find the podcast? Where can they connect on Instagram?
Yeah, so Instagram, Dr. Billy Garvey, Pop Culture Parenting and Guiding Growing Minds is the name of the social enterprise. And if you check that out online, you'll see a lot of the work that we do. And we're really interested in partnerships as well. So we do amazing partnerships with organisations that are out there. Just recently, one of the leading trauma services in Australia, Penguin, donated 1,100 copies of the book.
Amazing.
So that families that can't afford it can get access to it. So things like that is what I'm really excited about. How do we combine powers, which is what we've done today, to try and just make the world a kind of safer, healthier place for all of us out there, but especially our kids. So yeah, people who are keen, please reach out to us through those channels.
Absolutely. I'll put all the links in the show notes so people can follow along and go find their favorite movie reference on your podcast.
Thank you, Kelly. Amazing.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Be Well by Kelly LeVeque podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving a review in your favorite podcast app and subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. We're also excited to share that full-length video episodes are now on YouTube and Spotify, so you can watch along as you listen. The best way to support me and the show is by sharing it with your friends and family. Your recommendations make all the difference. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson. The video is recorded by Luke Rodriguez and edited by Jesse Trout. Sound mixing is by Mike Fry. See you next time.
The content of this show is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice and does not constitute a provider-patient relationship. As always, talk to your doctor or healthcare team first. Shout out to the Newport Beach Pendry for hosting us. I'm so grateful to record in such a beautiful space that truly elevates the podcast experience for myself and my guests. From the stunning design to their incredible hospitality, it's the perfect setting for meaningful conversations and creative energy. Hey, thanks, Pendry.